The dislikes are coming in. Now, before I talk about my issues with the show, I would like to talk about what I actually enjoyed about it, because while I don't understand why people have gravitated to this show so much, and they're saying that it's like the best Netflix show just that came out during 2020, I will talk about like what I actually enjoyed about it, because I didn't actually hate it at all. I actually did like it. So if you actually watch the behind the scenes, which is the creating of the Queen's Gambit, I watched it just after I finished the series, and they say that Beth Harmon's makeup, they have really specific detail to it, because when she's sort of becoming like a high profile chess player, they add more detail to her eyeshadow to be more like sexy or just getting into her femininity, which I thought was just a nice detail, because obviously her makeup changes during the film. It's actually really beautifully shot. The cinematography in the Queen's Gambit is always very symmetrical in its shots, and the lighting is pretty much on point. The camera work has always got like a lot of different interesting angles that you're not expecting. Like, it's always pleasing to look at. There's never any really boring shots. The acting and the performances weren't really that. There wasn't anything to complain about, really. The actress that plays Beth Harmon was very good. Like, mostly everyone was very good. My favorite character in the show is Benny Watts, that was played by Thomas Brodie Sangster, because while he does come across as a little bit like loving of himself, which is literally acknowledged by one of the other characters, he was like an opponent to Beth Harmon, and actually did still care about her, and was wondering like where the hell she's actually gonna like do some more games when she's having her downward spiral episode, slowly having a downward spiral into drinking, and he genuinely cared.
Always drink this much?
Sometimes I drink more.
I'm not even so sure I want to go to Paris anymore.
What are you gonna do instead, huh? Get drunk?
Now that you mention it, yeah.
But he was one of my favorite characters because he was kind of like an opponent. Also because Thomas Brodie Sangster is a really great actor. But he manages to be 30 and he still looks like a child. Like, he still looks like a weedy little kid, which I never really get. I like Borgov as well. He was actually one of my other favorite characters, because to give a little bit of context, when Beth is playing with this kid, at the end of the scene he mentions Borgov, and he's kind of meant to be like this almost this villain, because obviously he's going to be like Beth's like biggest opponent in the show. And once she actually finally defeats him and he like surrenders at the end, he ends up actually taking defeat really well, and he ends up actually, I found him a lot more respectable, because I thought he was going to get really proud or really like unlikable because he lost, but actually no, he actually took defeat really well, and he was very happy with like, accepting that defeat. Editing in the chess montages is always entertaining to watch. Those were always like one of the fun bits. There's a part where it's kind of part of her training that Beth is literally through Benny Watts' friends and all timing it, and it's always very fun, like, and interesting to watch all those. The editing is really, really good. The classical gas scene.
Now do classical gas!
Literally, the editing is amazing, but then again, I think everyone would really agree on that, because I don't know, it's kind of my favorite scene from the show because of the cinematography, because of the lighting, and also just because of the editing itself. I keep saying that, obviously. I feel like the chess montages in the show, I feel like they really appeal to chess players. I feel like the whole entire show is really going to appeal to chess players, because the show itself is titled The Queen's Gambit, which is another chess opening. I don't know shit about chess, to be honest, but I will say that like chess people are really going to get into it, because they're talking about all these different techniques, these different openings of literally just the outlinings of how to win properly and how to be very strategic in the game. So I feel like chess players are really going to get a lot out of this. I feel like they're really going to enjoy it, because the show is very informative of that. It really does hone in on that. It really focuses on the actual techniques and when the characters are playing. So I always find that, I think it would appeal very well to them. I don't play chess myself, but it still made chess kind of appealing. I don't know if I'd ever play it, but it definitely made it something interesting and something kind of cool because of these editing montages. The series itself, in fact, I do really enjoy this about the series. The series and all the plot events and the plot threads do actually culminate very well. So at the beginning of, in fact, the first episode is despite the fact that the first episode is very slow because it's just showing Beth's childhood and when she discovers chess, she meets this old man in this basement and starts teaching her like bits of the game, and that's when she discovers when she imagines and fantasizes about chess pieces moving on the ceiling. And later, and keep in mind, when she's at the foster home, she meets this other friend. I forgot her name, but I'll pretty much just writing during editing. And when she finally gets a family, the show really could have forgotten about the old man and could have forgotten about her friend. And when the final episode Endgame, when she comes back to the school. So the school, wait, did I just call it a school? Fuck, you know. When she comes back to the foster home, it pretty much cements that that's an essential part. And Beth goes down to the basement. He finds out that when just before the old man died, actually made the walls dedicated to like when she's rising in popularity, getting all her wins and becoming like a high profile name, which I thought was quite sweet. And also because her friend from the foster home ends up coming back at the end, and obviously that was at the point of when Beth was at her lowest lows. So I wouldn't say that the show I'm not saying that everything in the show that occurs always matters, because when Beth's stepmom dies, I wouldn't say that it had a lot of impact on the story. In fact, it didn't really have a lot of impact on her because she wasn't that sad. She didn't seem that saddened about it, which seemed a little bit strange. And also with her biological mother, who, again, there's always little hints of how weird she was, but I don't think it really had a lot of effect on the story. You're not really thinking about them when it's the climax of the series. But most of the plot threads and a lot of the plot events do actually matter in the course of the series, because a lot of shows I really do like, and kind of what separates a lot of shows and movies that I don't like as much, is that a lot of the events that happen during the series actually matter. They culminate in a very fluid way. So I do enjoy that about the show, that the events that happen in the show actually do matter. They're not just picked up, forgotten. I was almost assuming that it was going to be like that, but kind of similar to like other shows that I do enjoy, a lot of the events that happen actually have significant impact. They're not just forgotten. Those were all my positives with the show, and it's gonna sound twatish when I say it, but the more people that actually like the show, more people that go on like it's the best fucking show ever made, the more I just dislike it, because it's not that I'm not encouraged to actually like all the characters, which I do. I did enjoy all the characters. I did enjoy the characters, and I did obviously try to invest myself in the story, but I didn't really get out of much of Beth Harmon's character, and that's really the problem with the series, or at least my problem with the series. She's kind of what I describe as like a passive character. The difference between passive and active characters is that the passive characters don't influence the plot, and they don't drive a lot of the events. Not the reason or the catalyst of why those events even happen. Well, that's what you leave the active characters for. The active characters are obviously doing things that obviously drive opinions of other characters, and they're the ones that have to actually, they're the ones that go for an arc. So an example of the main character being a passive one is someone like Mason from Boyhood. If you actually know that film, where it's actually shot from 2002 to 2013 and wants to follow a boy's adolescence. So I do like Mason. I do think he's a likable character, but at the same time he doesn't do anything that actually is going to influence the plot, and things just sort of happen, and obviously he reacts to those events. The whole point of the movie is just moments in time, and obviously it's not the movie's fault that that Mason was an active character, but that was the whole point of it, is that he was a passive character. Like, that's just what they were doing with it, and well, it just is what it is. It is what it is. I do like Mason, but he's an example of a passive character. He doesn't influence the plot. Beth Harmon, and of course the Queen's Gambit is a completely different kind of idea compared to Boyhood. Beth Harmon again is still a massive character, so everything that the lack of everything she does, a lot of the events that happen in the show aren't really in her control. She's not putting herself into situations, maybe once or twice with the chess games, but other than that, it's usually consists of her going to different places, going to different countries and states, playing chess games, and she doesn't really have a lot of control over her own life. And it doesn't seem like the show has that much drive, because she isn't really an active character forcing a lot of these events, but if anything, everything's just kind of happening for her. So there's not a lot of motivation and there's not a lot of excitement from the show, because she doesn't really influence the plot or anything like that. Maybe once or twice, but I feel like it's a bad argument when you're gonna say that the reason why everything kind of just happened and she didn't have any control over her self-image, because obviously she was such a good chess player, but like she had all this fame and money, is because, I don't know, she's like a lost genius or problem with genius. I don't think that's really a good argument at all. I think you can still make her an active character and still have all the events happen just as they do. A main character in a movie or a show being passive and not actually influencing the plot, but the movie or show just happens to go that way. A good example of it is something like Spider-Man Far From Home, where Peter doesn't necessarily do anything. He just goes to places and then has to fight monsters. He has to fight criminals or bad guys when it just calls for it. It's nothing emotional or nothing. It's not based on Peter's choice or really like consequence. The Queen's Gambit isn't a show. It isn't an emotional show of genius, unlike what the writers say, especially in the creating of the Queen's Gambit, behind the scenes the little Netflix behind the scenes saying the show is about genius, which I don't think is even true. The show isn't an emotional story, it's just an informative story. Like I said, that obviously the show has a lot of emphasis on the outlinings and the techniques in chess rather than Beth's character. And while I said that will appeal to chess fans because it's more intellectual in that regard, rather than emotional, rather than like how she is, literally feeling with all this fame and everything that's happening around her. Especially because in the end of the series, she gets everything she wants. She wins against Borgov. She literally does everything she wants to do. The emphasis on chess techniques and just the show being more intellectual and informative is good for, chess players, and they will get a lot out of this. It also just kind of sacrifices me personally sympathizing with Beth. This might sound really simple, but having a character just appearing joyful or sad or happy or just kind of giddy, and it's just enough to find a character endearing. And Beth herself is very much just a stoic character. She's just kind of a stoic character that doesn't really do much, or she only has one or two little moments of, appearing happy or sad or, kind of like giggly, and they could have had at least more of that, because obviously I'd see her as like a human. I see her as a human character. Like it can even be like the case in some superhero movies where having a character just joyful or have like a regular kind of emotion is just enough to make your characters feel human and just feel like regular people, which I think it should be necessary. And the kind of stoic and Beth Harmon's stoicness really made me feel that this was more of like a Marvel origin story. It feels like the equivalent of a Marvel origin story rather than just a human story. Rather than parts that do merit a lot of sympathy and kind of adds a lot of pathos to her character, adds a lot of pathos to Beth Harmon, was her biological mother. There's an opening to the show where you see like moments of her biological mother, and you can tell that she's a fucking mental patient, and Beth found it really distressing. And while that might have had some sort of impact on Beth herself, that actually merits a lot of sympathy, because I was actually interested. I was like, what the hell's happening with her mother? And they keep it very secretive. Like, there's points where she's driving around to places, going to different people, and people are just yelling at her, or they're just telling her, or she's not getting what she wants because obviously she's quite desperate, and they always imply stuff like that, and I was like, I want to hear more about that rather than Beth herself. So why do they always imply that? Why do they make that more interesting than someone like Beth? I did find Beth's biological mother a little bit more like intriguing, because it was something that was, it's not that it wasn't just related to chess, but also just went into some of the like psychology or just some sort of repressed memories of Beth. And I feel like if the show had more of that, it actually would have made it. And not to mention that when her stepmother dies, again, there's not even a lot of impact from that death scene. Actually, she still comes off as just kind of stoic, and she doesn't come across as like emotional, really just outputting any emotion. It sounds kind of simple, just outputting emotion, because it sounds so specific, but the show doesn't do that, because obviously it creates such a superiority complex with Beth, and I don't know, it just kind of makes the characters feel less human. I went on a video which was, I don't know, it was I don't remember the title, but it was Benny Watts's friends, and they were helping Beth, and I saw a few people really get into that scene, saying that this is where she finally has a family. And I didn't feel like she was missing that, because obviously she wasn't emotional about that. She didn't feel like she was lost or anything, because she was too busy being stoic and just winning all these chess games and being determined in winning all these chess games. I'm not gonna say that Beth being stoic was really a bad thing, because there's a whole scene where her stepfather, who was a complete dickhead, there's a whole scene where Beth Harmon literally outsmarts him just so that she can buy the whole literally buy the whole house. And it's a really badass scene. I really love that scene, because it was so clever how she outsmarted him and how he was making a fool out of himself.
Pathetic? Well, I'm looking at pathetic.
There's always you always get those really cool moments where Beth is actually really intelligent and really logical in that regard. I think the problem with the show is that the side characters aren't that complex. They're too busy giving Beth like more of a pedestal, raise her sort of self-importance about why she's so much better than these other chess players. When she goes through all these different places and meets all these other different guys, they're mostly just saying, "Oh my god, you're the best player ever." Like she literally has like a million different people simping on her because she's such a great chess player. So everyone just kind of idolizes her way too much, and no one was really there to like. That's the reason why I like Benny Watts, because he was actually an opponent and actually challenged a lot of her beliefs. So no one was there to actually challenge her or really have a unique perspective on the story. They were too busy sort of just giving her this pedestal and just sort of validating her about why she's like the best chess player ever. And obviously I can't control people's opinions about the show, but I never saw the show as complex, because none of the other characters are really that complex. They're all too busy sort of putting Beth Harmon on this pedestal and why she's so great. And when you meet all these different other people, you don't find them as interesting as someone like Beth, because they're too busy giving Beth like a superiority complex, rather than just having a balanced middle ground, and you can have a lot of these different characters that you can just enjoy. Because there's only really two, in fact it will only be the like 2 and 3 characters that you find interesting, as opposed to everyone else. That you would like Beth, Benny Watts and Borgov, but not a lot of the other characters. I don't really have a lot of encouragement to actually invest myself in the world, or even though of course I did care about watching it. Again, there was already so many other people where one of the characters who, in fact no, I just realized one of the characters, it was this girl, and apparently people are saying that she's meant to be the spy, I don't know, some spy or something that was like spying on Beth. And I mean, I don't really have, because I'm not invested in these other characters, because the show really wants me to just like Beth so much that I couldn't have cared less. So I don't know. I mean, maybe people enjoy the show, maybe I'm just missing something, and I'd rather people, like, if you're gonna dislike the video already, just know that that I'm not actually trying to change your opinion. This is just my opinion. You don't have to agree with me. I know if the video is going to get dislikes. Actually, I know the video will get dislikes because it's an unpopular opinion, because this is obviously my opinion and no one else has criticized the show. No one else, at least I've heard, maybe like 1 or 2 other people, but no one particularly famous on YouTube has actually talked about why the show is really bad. Not bad, but just not as great as everyone else is hyping up to be. Because when I was asking other people, like, should I watch Queen's Gambit, they were saying, yes, you need to watch it, it's amazing. And it's not really that amazing because the show isn't complex. It's more of a Marvel origin story of a film. Show, what the fuck, complex kind of show. It's not really a complex show because none of the other characters are that complex, and only Beth is meant to be the only one with the most development rather than the other people. Because Beth herself, she herself is a stoic character. When this other guy, one of her friends before she started going to all these different places after school, he ends up becoming concerned about her, and because that he was actually caring about her and she really wasn't, in fact she was just more like rude and stoic, just made me dislike her even more. I don't really know, but like I just kind of wish that the show didn't just only focus on Beth and at least focused on other characters. That would have made it actually complex and actually like a much more deeper show.
I'm worried about you.
Don't make me over.
What on earth for?
But they didn't really go for that. It's a very gentle show. It's really easy to get into, and it will really impress a lot of people because obviously it does. I'll say it feels like a very popularized kind of show, and while I personally can't get into it, I do still love the cinematography. I think Benny Watts' character is really good, and obviously the classical gas scene, that's like my favorite scene in the entire show. I just love the editing in it. It's a good scene. But I don't know, if you're gonna dislike the video, at least tell me if I'm wrong, or just tell me like if I see the show in this sort of light, or what you got out of the show, or how much you got out of the show, like even more.
The truth.